I've got a test machine, so I'll just have to have this one to test.
Do they?
Why are you sitting there? If you were here, you could have said bye.
Can you get the medal?
I'm hoping if Kara joins, she'll join me. I swear to God, if she sits back there.
Hello.
What's your exercise rank? How many? Just 30. I got it. Haven't had much right there.
405. Yeah, I just did 2 combines.
It's been 595 in this hour. Well, it's like 12. 12 hours.
I could cut Cheryl's here. You should see what it is. That's so funny. That's so big. I'm at like 4. I was 420. Karen?
Yeah, I've had
I always
those
laugh.
nights
I'm
where
like, I always laugh when I'm like sitting and watching TV in my range. Or I'm like, the other night I was doing something really weird. I was sitting outside having a drink by the fire in my room.
Wait a minute. How do we know what our rings mean? Oh, wow.
You guys do that.
Yes, of course I do. Oh, I see. So I have. Well, here's the thing. This is my hot lap. Hot lap. No, I went outside. No, I did. Yeah, but I went back and forth. I worked my car too, so that closed half. It's quite a hike. Only at 316 and 478. All right.
Did you see that menu when I popped up?
1 minute my schedule. I'm telling you, Dan, I hate that. Okay.
Fine. You see that? Okay. I don't know how to give you a different output.
Good evening. It is now. Good evening. There we go. This is an official meeting of the school board. We have school directors. Do we have 2 school directors online? Okay, so I'm going to call the meeting to order. It's probably 6:02 at this point. And here this evening we're joining to talk about the budget, the ongoing budget process, where we are in that process, and to share a little bit about the decision-making and the paradigms that we've used to get to this place. And at this point, I'm going to hand it over to Karen Conway to give us an update on where we're at. Thank you, Karen.
Thank you for joining us.
I appreciate you venturing out in the weather. I hear it's getting worse, so I said the true Vermonters are here this evening. And this community forum is for you. It's the opportunity to give us some input or ask your questions. We'll continue these conversations as we get closer to January when we have to approve a budget. But we did want to make sure we had an opportunity to have conversations with our community members and for you to give us feedback. Sadly, I'm going to give you the suspense now. I don't have numbers to tell you tax rates today. So if you're here to hear about your increase or decrease in the taxes, we don't have all the numbers, and I'll explain more in the presentation. But I will give you just an update about our district, the number of students we serve, and just some general information and where we are in the budget process. And then we will open it up for questions and community comments. And so I will start off with the St. Johnsbury School District profile. And I say St. Johnsbury School District because we do host this event in the school, and we talk a lot about the school, but we serve more than just the students in this building. We serve over 1,058 students currently, grades pre-K through 12. The percentage of students that qualify for free and reduced lunch is around 51%. So our poverty levels are high in this community. We have students that qualify for individual education plans, IEPs refer to them as, and 504s, 34% of our students qualify. And we currently are experiencing an increase in homelessness in the community, and it's about 4% of our students. And this is district-wide, so it's all of our students pre-K through 12. I'll start off with pre-K. So we have universal pre-K in our district. We have a pre-K coordinator that supports all of these programs in our community and in our school. We have 7 partnering programs right now that have licensed teachers serving 83 students in our community. These are 3- and 4-year-olds. We also have our all-day pre-K program in the school, and we serve right now 33 students in the school. And so a part of Act 166 is our universal pre-K program. We support 10 hours of pre-K in these partnering programs, and this is also included in the local budget. It is a state decision to offer pre-K universally through the state, but we pay, or projected to pay for FY26, $3,982 for any of those partnering programs that offer 10 hours per week for 35 weeks annually. Now I'm going to just chat about the St. Johnsbury School. We currently have enrollments of 633 students. This is pre-K through 8, and we have approximately 15 students in pre-K through 8 that are attending, we refer to it as out-of-district placements. So these are schools, a lot of them in a therapeutic setting, that are not within the building. Our classes per grade, we have 3 pre-K classrooms, currently 5 kindergarten classrooms, 4 first through 4th grade classrooms in each of those grades. 5th and 6th, from last year's cuts, we went down to 3 classrooms for those grades, and 7th and 8th grade have 4 classroom teachers per grade. In our unified arts offerings, we offer art, health, music, phys ed, library. We've also included STEAM and technology, and we do a lot of extracurricular activities. These are just to name a few, dealing with band, chorus, theater, sports, speech, debate, robotics, spelling bees, GeoBees, math counts, bridge building. There's all kinds of things going on, and we can't say enough about our after-school and summer program that we offer for our students, basically year-round, called Catch. And this program has such great community partnerships and really exposes students to, one, their personalized interests, and two, it really engages them in learning either after school or in the summer. We really like to pull that into our regular education programs because it's really outstanding. Our class sizes currently range between 12 students to 19 students in each of these classrooms. And I'll move on to looking at high school. We currently have 349 students in grades 9 through 12. They do have choice. 23 students are out-of-district placements. So again, these are students that aren't attending, well, they are attending some schools locally, but they're not in our academy or the Linden Institute. They're attending therapeutic programs. And 74% of our students do go to the St. Johnsbury Academy right here. We have about 10% attending Linden Institute, 8% that are a wide range of other schools, 6% in Arlington, and 2% go to the Danville School. And that is all by choice. We do not provide transportation. When we look at our enrollment trends, they're still pretty steady. You know, when you can see when COVID, there was quite a decrease, but the enrollments have come back up. A lot of home study took place in 2020, which is in 2021, which is why you see that decline. But we're back up around where we've been in the last couple years. High school as well is seeing a little bit of decline over the last several years. But we're anticipating next year about 10 less students attending our high schools based on our enrollments of our outgoing and incoming ninth graders. And this is just to give you a feel for the projected enrollments for the classes in our school here in St. Johnsbury. We limit the number of pre-K students that we have. We're licensed for 15 students in each of the classrooms, but we do try to limit the numbers just to be able to give more attention to the students and their needs. And as you see, we do anticipate a lower enrollment for kindergarten coming in. It's not the normal trend, but they're looking at about 57 students, and again, there could be some that pop out of the woodwork that we're not aware of, but basically we range between 57 and 75 students in a grade, in a cohort. Just to give you a little bit of information about our student outcomes and how our students are doing. This is a new assessment that the state required us to participate in. This is the first time our students participated in the program, but you can see we have work to do in our math areas, but it does follow the trends of the state. The red line are our scores of our students, and these are the number of students that were scored proficient or above. And the blue line, bluish-green line, is this number of students at the state level. So the first chart is math. To your left and over to your right is the English language arts, and our scores are a little better. We're seeing some improvements. And again, this is the first time we've taken this exam, so we cannot look at year over year how our students are doing. When we look at the disaggregated data, there's two historically marginalized groups that we monitor based on our targeted supports, and those are students experiencing poverty and also students qualifying for special education. And so you can see up the chart up in the upper right-hand corner where the state proficiency range is, and then how we are doing as a school compared to the state. So this again is percent proficient and above, and the graph below is really showing the state assessment for those marginalized groups, like I said, experiencing poverty or students who qualify for special education. So the green is the ELA and the blue chart is the math scores. And I had referenced this number before. It just identifies the needs in our school, and this is district-wide. So this includes high school as well. That we have 34% of our students who are eligible for an IEP or 504 services, and we have seen growth. It's hard to tell from this chart, but it has grown over the last several years. And so that's just a kind of quick update on the school. Now I can share with you a little bit about our budget process and where we are in the process. So we have met with the school board several times, and the board actually explored two different scenarios, what it would take to have a level budget, a level funded budget, so that means zero increase, and that would be $29,281,753,000 versus a level service budget. And so the level service budget really used the same staffing model that we have now, but with a lot of the required upgrades, whether it's negotiated salary increases, statewide negotiated benefits. We would be looking at a 4.9% increase over FY25 if we kept the same level service. So the difference would be an additional $1.4 million. As I mentioned, the primary factors for these budget increases really around salaries and benefits. As in many schools, 80% of a school district's budget is salary and benefits. We're a little bit different because we do tuition our high school students, but salary and benefits do range at the top. There is a slight increase also in our regular education tuition, and the other large increases around special education and the transportation costs to get students where they need to get their services that they need. So the school board, after reviewing this information, really provided us some parameters that were really tough when we think about the needs of our school and the needs of our unique needs of our students, the ever-changing needs of our students, and actually directed us. They felt that they didn't feel comfortable submitting a 4.9% increase to the community and asked us to aim for 3.5%. And this results in a reduction of $400,000. We try to still align our budget decisions to our strategic plan. You know, we have around academics and excellence, our connections, our wellness, and our organizational goals. These are all available if you'd like to see our strategic plan on our website. But it doesn't really necessarily take into mind the specific needs of our students and how they have changed. It really pinholed us to look at where we can cut with the least impact on our staff and our programming and our students. So some general proposed options that we had given to the school board to review related kind of like some trade-offs. We experienced last year cutting 5th and 6th grade teachers, and it has not been going well at all to have only 3 teachers in those cohorts. So we have actually proposed adding back in the 4th 5th grade teacher and the 4th 6th grade teacher. And because of the increasing demands of our needs of our students, and especially around special education, we really needed to add another special education teacher to support those needs. So there's actually additions in this budget proposal, but it also looked at where we can reduce. And again, this is not in the best interests. If we had our way, we would not cut at all. But we did look at positions that we have either struggled to fill or the need is not there currently based on the funding models, the special education models that we've been working on. And we were suggesting to reduce 7 special education paraprofessionals that are currently unfilled in our current budget, along with 2 regular education paraprofessionals that are currently unfilled, and these would normally be in 1st grade. And the hardest decision of them all was looking at reducing one of our kindergarten classrooms. They added this classroom right after COVID. When the changes in our students, we were seeing significant increases in basic functional skills coming into the school. We had added the 5th grade, the 5th classroom for kindergarten, and because of enrollment numbers and anticipated numbers coming in, we offered the suggestion of 1 teacher in kindergarten, which would also include 1 paraeducator. So right now, we do have paraeducators, regular ed paraeducators in each of our kindergarten classrooms supporting the kindergarten teacher, and we would reduce that by 1 classroom. So we'd be down to 4, which would be consistent across the school, except for 3rd grade, pre-K. Pre-K would still only have 3 classroom teachers. So this proposed budget did get us down to that actually 3.34%, which was around the range that the board had tasked us with doing. The proposed budget right now, and again, we are continually getting updated information about tuition rates from all of our independent and public schools. We're also waiting to get information on our weighted average daily membership student counts. So we still don't have those numbers calculated correctly, but we would be looking at increasing our budget from last year by $977,624, which is that 3.34% increase. And this is based on this draft budget. This is kind of a breakdown where the costs are and the percentage of the costs in that budget proposal. Salaries and benefits, again, are one of the larger percentage of our budget. At 34%, we did break out salaries and benefits for special educators, so that you could see compared to regular education, which was 12% of the budget. The other larger ones, we spend $1.9 million for contracted services for special education, which is 6%. Our regular ed high school tuition, it is $0.2 million at 27% of our total budget. The pre-K tuition that I mentioned to you is like $270,000. It's 1%, but tuition for special education, these are tuition rates for students that are attending those therapeutic programs, is $2.5 million. And we are seeing some increases in our transportation costs because we're needing to travel farther to find these programs to support our students. And we wrapped up a bunch of miscellaneous items of $864,000. So I mentioned the positions that we were looking at reducing. There are also some reductions that we identified when we went line by line, and we did share a copy of that report that's available for you to look at. The reductions that we looked at for outdoor education, which are basically our field trips and our outdoor events that we have for all of our students. We just looked at what we use during ESSER funding, what we use from grant funding, and what we've used so far this year, and feel that we can make a small reduction and still be able to provide a robust program for our students. We talked about some must needs in the construction of our building. That's deferred maintenance that we put off, but we were talking about utilizing the capital reserve, about $50,000. That would also help us with our reductions. I mentioned the kindergarten classroom, which would impact 2 employees, 1 regular ed teacher and 1 regular ed paraprofessional. And then those 9 paraprofessionals that are currently unfilled but are in our FY25 budget, we have also included those as reductions, and then there's some miscellaneous items. Again, I wish I had more information. The state has prepared or has put out their yield, their estimate for the yield. And they are changing the way that is related to the common level of appraisal and how your properties are evaluated. And we're waiting to find out our enrollment numbers, our average daily membership. We do have the numbers from the state, but it doesn't have all of the weightings identified for some of our independent schools. So we're waiting to get those numbers accurate. And then we should be able to generate what an actual cost would be on your tax rates. But until we have that information, we weren't able to do so far. So I don't know if there are any questions from this point. That's basically all I have prepared to share with you this evening, but I'm open for any questions specifically. Yes?
Can you describe the impacts of the cuts that you had to make in terms of how they'll affect, classroom teachers and that sort of thing?
They're very difficult because there are some components of the school that we still need to work on. And I say that in there, we have some concerns about behaviors, and the behaviors that we are seeing from our really young students. Pre-K, K, we're seeing just things that you haven't seen ever before. And so we do know that we need to get them supports, and we're trying to develop kind of like I don't want to call it a therapeutic program, but our own program internally that keeps students included with their peers in their classrooms, but be able to get them the services that they need. And so we're trialing that out slowly right now. I wish we could add our own therapeutic program to the budget, some sort of alternative program to support our students. It just didn't seem with the cost containment measures that we're getting from very loud and clear from the state that we need to be very concerned, with our cost containment. But if we were to meet the needs, it is not supporting them. And we do feel the numbers are low, and they would still have supports in their classrooms with paraprofessionals. But if we're going to move in that direction, we really need to move in the direction where we need additional supports to address the functional skills that are not coming in with students that we're finding.
Only because I've challenged Karen very recently to look at this idea because I'm really struggling with how we're not meeting the needs of students in our classrooms. And we have other alternatives for them, but we're not finding enough of them, and we're not getting our students back. And I'm really concerned about that for a variety of reasons. And so a little bit late in the game, I've asked Karen to look at what it would take for us to be able to bring many of these tuition students back into our district, inside of our walls, whatever that means. And that is, it's not an easy sell, and I get it. But there are reasons why I think it's important, and we're going to be talking about that. And there is a faction of the school board, speaking for myself, who really wants us to look at what it would take for us to bring some of our tuition students back into the district so that we can meet their needs.
And I should clarify, it's not a lot of students, but when you have one student that's struggling with the learning environment, it can disrupt the whole classroom. And so we do recognize there's a significant need. And so it's figuring out how we can do this. We're looking at grants. We have right now, we're working on, there's about $785,000, I think we calculated today, in grants that we're looking to support the school in many other ways. And so we are looking at grants, and I have been working closely with NKHS and their director to see, and our special ed director as well, looking to see how we can build these programs and maybe utilize Medicaid funding to support the services that we need. But anytime you take away, we're just increasing the classroom, and it's going to have an impact. It's still, I believe, manageable with the number of students that we have coming in, and it'd be very similar. I believe it's like 14 students in a class, so you have one paraeducator helping, but it's changing the model. We changed for a reason after COVID, but it's making us look at, what options do we have? Then we would be going at programs. And one direction the school board really wanted us to steer away from was our middle school programming, and making sure that we were offering choices and options that would engage students in learning and their interests. So it pointed us to the lower school. Yes?
So clearly you spent a great deal of time on this, but it's referred to as a draft, and so it sounds like it's still kind of a work in progress. It sounds like what Abby's proposing, if that actually were to get implemented, that would probably change some numbers, certainly change the location and which line the numbers are going on. So what's the timeline? I mean, do you have to have this ready within a month?
We are proposing to the school board to have it approved by January 6th, I believe is the date. So we have, a month to still discuss and review. We'll have numbers coming in that will help us reflect any impact on the tax rate. But that's why we wanted to open up this forum to get feedback from the community. I've been meeting with staff. I can tell you they're not happy, but that's why we're doing this process. And we look for a vote because we do need to prepare the town report and get it printed and prepared. So, and we want to meet the requirements for warning the budget as well.
And I think you mentioned, and I understand there were some changes to how the common level appraisal is actually going to impact all towns in Vermont. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yes, and I don't know, I might call Jacob up here. Scott Beck just left. But what it, in the past, if you think about, the school would prepare a budget. This is my simplistic version of it. The school would prepare a budget, and we would come up with an education tax rate. And then they would look at how your properties are valued, the market value, and it would raise your tax rate based on your common level of appraisal. They're trying to take that out of the, I guess, the formula or how it works. So now the yield takes in consideration the average statewide common level of appraisal, and so it gets you closer. So when I reported an education tax rate, it's very close to what you have for a tax rate in your community. So if you remember last year, I believe it was almost 50 cents more. It'll be really close now because of the way they're doing it. Our property values are still selling high, so there will be a little bit of a percentage increase, but it still comes out with the same number. It's just, I can't blame the CLA. So it's the shared, again, it's the shared cost of educating students in Vermont, and it's still based on your values of your property.
But it's going to actually be based on property values statewide as opposed to just in our community. Is that right?
It's calculated on that, but then I think it is reverted to the actual common level appraisal.
Yeah.
You want to clear?
More specific on that, the way that it has changed is the property yield now takes into account the difference between the average value within the state. So now our CLA is just based off of the average throughout the state. Our CLA did go up, but the property yield because of this went down. So in the end, it's supposed to give you the exact same tax rate in the end. It's just now the weight is more affected on the property yield than the CLA. So it's just the underlying tax rate I'd recommend looking at.
Yes.
So what is the actual percentage comparison of the change in tuition of pre-K through 8 versus the high school tuition for this upcoming budget?
The change in percentage?
Yeah, like increase-wise.
Well, back on a couple slides, I don't have the, didn't mean to do that.
So we don't have high school tuition numbers right now. So that's, I think, the first part of your question.
We have estimated percentage
we have
increase.
estimates in our budget, but we haven't had hard numbers delivered from.
Yeah, do you have the report handy? I believe it's 2 point.
So the overall tuition increase for regular ed is $127,290, while the rest of the budget is $850,959 as of right now. It means about 2.81% of the budget is outside of regular ed of that increase. 2.81% is outside of the regular ed tuition increase, and the rest of it is just the anticipated regular ed tuition increase. And that is subject to change as better estimates come in. Does that make sense?
Not really.
No, yeah, so I think ultimately what I think, Lynn, you're really asking is that we're looking at an anywhere between 3.5 to 5% target increase, and we don't know where our high schools are going to come in. We know that they hear it, and somebody who knows more about this is willing to weigh in on this, which I appreciate.
Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Howell.
You're welcome, yeah. We're aware that in this budget, the high school tuition has been budgeted at a 6% increase. And what we can say is that we're not planning. We're planning to come in at 5% or below.
Which is, we've been working, this has been an ongoing conversation that we've been having
I
weekly or
appreciate
daily.
the
Yeah, or like, yeah, to zero this in, and I'm not gonna speak for other people, but I feel a much more robust collaboration percolating within our educational ecosystem. I really think we made really great strides in thinking of ourselves as a much more of a whole, and the relationship between all those numbers, and I think we're headed in the right direction in terms of understanding all those trade-offs.
It's good to hear.
Yep. And I wouldn't say that I didn't mean it.
Can you give an estimate as to how much of the revenue side of the budget comes from grants that have time periods of, say, 1 to 3 years?
I don't have those numbers with me this evening, but I can get them for you.
You want to wag?
This is from sunset in 1 to 3 years, just so I understand your question. Things that would sunset in 1 to 3 years.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, I believe our federal title funds, which are in the news a lot right now, is around 1.2 million that we get usually annually. I'd have to pull all the reports unless you know the number, Jacob.
I know most of our big ones.
This might be a follow-up. Can I ask, like, just rather than us try to estimate right now, this might be a good follow-up, not to shut you off, but I just want to make sure that we're giving, like, sorry to shut you down.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, it's about, for year over year, the two ones we're pretty much guaranteed long-term are 21C and CFP. Those combine to about 1.3 million right now, and it'll be about 1.4 after. And then for stuff that would end in the next 2 to 3 years, we're probably looking at 225,000 right now. The Stronger Connections grant is our biggest one, and now that ESSER's done, we don't really have too many that will be ending anytime soon.
So kind of the basis of my question really is how much of the operational expenses that are funded by those grants continue onwards after the grants have expired, and therefore have to be funded by taxpayer increases?
Yeah.
Right now, the only one that has an expiring grant that is the Stronger Connections, which would be the Dean of Students. Outside of that, we don't have any expenditures on expiring grants that would be coming on the local in the next 2 to 3 years. Yeah.
And theoretically, if it's all working right, grants are specifically tied to outcomes. So if we didn't see outcomes, we should be assessing the deployment of those funds and making sure that, theoretically, in some ways, maybe grants give us a little flexibility, for a little bit of flexibility, but when that comes back home, we take a different lens.
Right, but a grant of $1 million on a budget of 29 or 30 million is a significant number.
Yeah.
And so if that translates into taxpayer increases, that's a significant number to some of us. So I'm just trying to get a sense as to
Absolutely.
kind of what that impact.
Yeah, well,
potentially
and ESSER gave us a really false, that was a huge deployment of federal funds and a huge amount of need, frankly, that was created in our educational ecosystem, frankly. So, I understand, get where you're coming from, and I think it's a really important question, because we can't create unfunded liabilities. Ultimately, it's at the heart.
And so some of the grants that we're going after right now are looking at our facilities and how efficient we're running, opportunities where we could get reimbursements to help do particular upgrades. Whether it's we have to upgrade our lighting, our LED lighting, to someday looking at our boilers. Our boilers are really aged. Mark is here, he could probably speak to it better. We're also look at grants. Right now we're piloting with all of the Northeast Kingdom superintendents, looking at how we're in a grant that's been funded by the Department of Labor to really help grow our own teaching staff. There's such a shortage with teachers, so we've joined that type of grant funding. So they're actually paying for tuition for our staff to get educated, get their paid for tuition, providing them mentorships. So we're looking at grants that way too, that are short term. It's only going to be able to develop our staffing model, and even paraprofessionals. We have a lot of paraprofessionals that have bachelor's degree but not a master's, so it's helping them get those degrees where they could become a teacher. So it's grants like that as well. And we also look at grants to help us do planning, like visionary work. Right now we're looking at some community school grants, which are really moving us in the direction of how we want to be a community partner and happens in this community. So it's tapping into the resources in this community. And so there's grants that help us in planning. There's even grants that would help us with planning an alternative program. So there's also those type of grant opportunities that we really try to take advantage of.
Okay, so 51% of the students are under free and reduced lunch. So does all the money for the breakfast lunch program mostly come from federal funding, or does anything have to come out of the district?
It comes out of the ed fund, the state ed fund, so it does impact the total cost, and if we're all paying a piece of the cost to educate all students in Vermont, it does impact. They are talking about moving it out of the ed fund because it's one of those kind of state mandated programs, and they were talking about moving it into their local, but right now it is, we don't pay, you pay indirectly because it's state funded, if that makes sense. There's a few of those programs out there.
Just a small follow-up question on capital reserve fund. Do you have a sense as to what the current value of the capital reserve fund is?
It's about 50,000.
Okay.
Yeah.
I will say, as a school chair, I'm not in favor of that. I think we just had to find about, correct me if I'm wrong, $250,000 to shore up a bank that failed right outside so that the Quanah School doesn't end up in our fields. And that's money we're having to creatively find this year so that we don't run a deficit next year. And that's the very inherent intent of those funds, as well as we're shorting our facilities budget by offsetting those funds. And so that would be one thing that we've discussed, but actually I'm not in favor of it. I think that we have a building that was made up of parts. Some of our buildings quite old. It was the original trade school for the town of St. Johnsbury. And then we have parts of our buildings that are more new, that have less facilities needs. But that's an area that I've kind of pushed back a little bit on, Karen. I don't think, again, feeling it out, and this year, we have to shore up the bank. We got to find the money. That's the flexibility that is inherently built into that fund. So I'm not in favor of pushing that. Yeah, no, and I'm glad you asked because I wanted a chance to tell you my.
Well, I was just curious as to, there's no balance sheet with this information, so it doesn't tell us what the current capital reserve fund is. So I was just kind of curious as to where that stood. So.
Our audit is online, which has that information.
So the disaster that she just spoke of wasn't covered by insurance?
It's covered, correctly.
Yeah, well, we applied for FEMA assistance, so it was caused by the flood this July, and so that's just a process. It's quite a process.
It's going to take about a year. We have to estimate from a cash flow perspective. We need to be prepared for a year for that reimbursement to come in. So
you're talking to a victim, so.
Yeah, we have to find the funds now because we can't finish our big construction project until that bank is secure. Thank you, Jacob. But these problems are come up. It's Jacob that helps find the money to make it happen. So. Hey, Jordan.
Yes.
Okay, so I'll be the guy in the group that says, when I attended the finance committee meetings, I had suggested a rate less than what you've proposed so far. I know the board felt they could live with, so really what I think the board has to consider is what the taxpayer is going to live with. So my opinion is that you will find acceptance with a level funded budget. You want to expedite that, you actually reduce that budget so that people have a chance to kind of fund their own budget. And I'll tell you that one of the things that upsets me is when people say we do this for the children. I'm also thinking of the future of the children in this school district. I have a daughter that's a microcosm who can't find a house here or get a good paying job that could afford a house here. She has to do it elsewhere. And I think that trend is following because we have such great expenses here. It's very difficult for a fourth grader who's just going to step from lower to upper to realize that in 12 years, something's going to happen. And it probably isn't going to happen in this town because it's just too expensive. So I own a budget as much as we want to do everything we can for the kids. I want that consideration to extend out 12 and 15 years from now when we want our vision of children improving through the school. And this is a great school. This is great staff. And I think they can rise to the occasion. They do with my daughter, and she's a tough nut. So consider the future of all of the children that go through this program, not just for the immediate short-term gain, but also for the long term. And then consider the people that have to fund this.
Thank you.
We have a question online.
Yeah.
The question is the savings from having 10 fewer high school students included in this budget?
Yes. Yep. Yes, we have to guess basically based on the number of students graduating, number of incoming students, and we always add a couple extra, but it does include 10 less students.
Well, I would just like to comment that if public school is going to level fund, the academy should level fund as well. It's only fair. And I don't think most of the citizens in this town probably understand the dynamic of how the tuition works and, how we take it out of the lower grades, pay for the upper. And I know they do a good job and they have a lot of, money from alumni and all, but it's got to be, a fair situation. And I think you guys are doing it, but I don't think it's fair to say, you guys level fund and you guys get an increase. I mean, these are the kids who are feeding into that system and they need services too, so.
So I don't know if you have our slides available to pull up, Karen, but we gave a presentation to the school board last week. And one of the things that we wanted to really be clear about is, our tuition. So first of all, we have 45% of the students in the district at the high school, and we make up 27% of the budget that people have seen from that pie chart. But we have 80% of our students are publicly tuitioned, and those public tuitions only make up 43% of our annual operating expenses, or they are operating revenues. So all that is to say that the tuition that we set covers everything in our budget, right? So it covers everything for each student that comes from the district. And it does not pay, it's not the cost of educating a student. It is a tuition that we try very hard to keep as low as possible because we want to consider the the people in the community and do the best we can for that. I'll say we're making very difficult decisions right now, and if you ask our staff and faculty, we just made a decision to change our health care benefits carrier. That's given us significant savings, but that's a difficult thing to do. Healthcare is a difficult benefit to sort of tamper with, but we've done it because we recognize that the double-digit increases in health benefits every year with Lehigh is just not sustainable. So we're really making some tough decisions at the moment to try to keep our tuition rate as low as we can, and it's not apples to apples in terms of the budget increase for the district and our tuition increase.
Yeah, I understand that. I think some of it's just perception too. Yeah. And that's what people go on.
Well, that's why we're here. Want to help with that a little bit? And
yeah.
Thank you, Karen. So this is just kind of what I was saying. This is for last year, right? So we had 739 day students, not all publicly tuitioned, but 180 boarding students. And you'll see that the private funding from the private day tuitions, boarding, endowment, annual giving, so we have to raise at least $500,000 a year to try to make up some of the difference between what it costs to educate and what we receive. But it's 45% of our annual revenue comes from that private funding, and only 43% from the publicly tuitioned students. And we do get some money from the state for CTE and adult ed, and we have students from New Hampshire as well who on public tuitions and private pay. So we are subsidizing pretty heavily, and really glad to do it because we're able to offer such a great education for kids, and we're very, very happy to be collaborating with the district because it's the best thing for kids. Yeah, so similarly, 62% of our budget is salaries and benefits. 15% is the boarding program that produces that much more revenue for us. And then utilities, equipment, supplies, 12%. And we have professional development, just like the district does, and then a small percent for debt and taxes. But again, so we're facing the same kinds of pressures, financial pressures that the district is, and really trying to keep that tuition increase low. Carol, do you want to talk about the special education?
Right, just there's a block grant for every student in the district, including high school students, and we just wanted to point out for the board to consider that the amount that we charge for special education costs is about $1 million less than the town actually gets for each student through the block grant.
So our
and there's we could talk more about this, or we could table it because it's a little bit of it's hard to, special education is incredibly complicated, and the state funds it, and back to some of my original sort of, or what's percolating most in my mind is how do we manage special education costs? They have become incredibly volatile. They do not meet the needs. The total pool does not meet the needs of students, or at least not without an immense amount of creativity. And building the Titanic, or the ship as it sails. And what is complicated about this is that the state has changed the formula. We're adjusting to it. There may be even further changes to it, but we still have students with extraordinary need. And we have a legal and moral responsibility to fund their educations, and some of those students require double-digit, six-figure numbers to fund their education. That has an impact on that number considerably. So, yeah, and right, I think the ultimate, sorry, Sharon, I don't want to interrupt you.
That's okay. I think all Carol is trying to point out is that we also try very hard to keep, we're serving students in special services, we're testing them, we're doing a lot of really good intervention with them, but we're really trying hard to bill fairly for that, those services.
And one cool thing that I've heard is work that the Academy is willing to do with us around their continuing education, particularly if we can pull in some of the resources from adult education. When we think about what resources are in our sort of educational ecosystem, we can do better. And that's going to take us continuing to do what we do. But I'm going to be totally honest with you. I don't know how we do that level funded. I just don't know how we do that. And I am steeped in this, and I hear you. I am a daughter of this community. I'm a mother of this community. I'm a taxpayer of this community. I hear you loud and clear. But the consequences of not doing it, as somebody who also works in the public defender's office, are profound.
We are talking about special education on a positive note. We are anticipating an increase in revenue, which does help to offset taxes. And so when you talk about leveling the budget, there is possibility that we could have a level tax rate even with a small 3.3% increase on our expenditures, because there is offsetting revenues. So I don't know, when you're saying level it, would keeping the tax rate the same, do you think the community would support that?
Not sure, because when we try to set a tax rate, it's kind of dog chasing tail. The real aspect is we spend a lot more money than we ever have before. And it isn't the taxing part, it's the spending part. So if we control expenditures, then ultimately it drives that budget down.
Yep. Yep.
So it's really the spending. It's not trying to make it match a tax rate at 0%. It's trying to make a spend rate at 0%.
Yep, well, and I can tell you that statewide, superintendents are trying to do that. We all have to do it to have an impact on your taxes.
Listen, this is no criticism of the work that goes on by the school board. They are faced with trying to get $5 out of $4. And it's not a fair prospect. Your legislature has let you down. One of the things that bugs me is that there are rates that we can look at that the taxpayer in St. Johnsbury is going to pay, but the commercial guy is going to pay much more. So it comes from someplace.
Yeah.
And so that means rents go up. That means cost of goods go up. And so it all boils down to we need to control our expenses. We need to get the legislature to learn how to develop a real plan towards funding education, not what they came up with.
Yep, yep, I agree.
It's not your fault.
Nope.
But you get to deal with it. I
Yeah,
understand.
we know that.
And I'm going to tell you right now, I appreciate the efforts that you guys put in. Don't consider feedback as criticism.
No,
Feedback is feedback.
We're here opening ourselves up to it
Understood.
on numerous occasions to give people an opportunity to engage, because I do value, I have respect. I mean, like, I'm not joking. I grew up here. I mean, my father, I'm with you. I have these discussions with my father, like, right? Like, and the last thing I want to do is have them after the fact with a bunch of assumptions. I want us to engage in this discussion, and I'm ready for it, and we think it's really important.
It gets harder and harder for you to try and say, okay, my daughter generationally is going to be able to do the same thing I did. That's a reality. And so that's where we need to kind of draw a line in the sand and say, listen, for the good of this community, let's make these expenses less, make us much more attractive to people who want to move into the area, create something that our kids can actually work in and survive.
And we may differ, we may have a slight agree to disagree.
Okay.
Because as somebody who chose,
But
like,
we're only listening this
All right,
evening.
that's okay. I'm willing to say this. There's a lot of people who are looking around and saying, I want somewhere else to be. And if there are, chances are, if they're wage earners, particularly two, they care a whole lot about education.
Sure.
And I think that we have lost a lot of families, and I'm making an assumption, and I may be totally wrong. This may just be, I think that we have lost over the last 25, 30 years, we have lost families who may have considered this community, but were concerned about educational quality, not at the high school level, because they come. We pay their tuition. We know they come eventually, right? We want them to come a little earlier in the process and stay a little bit longer, because they might stay after 4 years or 6 years.
I can say I've worked with many school districts in the Northeast Kingdom, many school districts on the other side of the river in New Hampshire, and what we have to offer here, the wraparound services is really amazing, and the opportunities, and when you see, you come and see the theater program or the chorus, the jazz band singing in the community, it's really amazing what we're able to offer, and we want to make sure we keep that. And we will figure this out. We need to pull together, but we need to pull together as a community. And that's why I'm looking into the community schools. I'm really looking into what grant funding is out there to help us, design a system that I should be working directly with my mental health providers in the community. I should have the dentists coming here to help my kids. Like right now, we use grants to help provide those services to our students, but in their well-being, that needs to be cared for. They can't learn if they're not physically, mentally ready to learn. And so I know we have to do those things, and we're going to try to be as creative as possible, trying to be physically responsible, because we do understand the impact on this community and taxpayers and fixed incomes, and it's no fun.
I understand, and unfortunately, the growth cycle doesn't equal the grant cycle.
Yeah.
And that's really where we need to be, so that grant is replaced by growth financially, somewhere.
Yep.
There shouldn't be enough for us.
No, that's fine.
Yeah, I mean,
It's your
that's my hope.
opportunity.
It's like, I would love to see, it's like it's almost if we could accelerate growth in St. Johnsbury for 5 years. Like, I wish I had a magic dial, because I think we're almost there. I really do, but we need our housing stock to increase.
But those grants would equal a percentage of the budget, say it's 2% or 3%, and that's not unrealistic growth.
We
But
just
to
need
your
our,
point, we're not seeing it.
No, and we know that the jobs are there. We know that the hospital's desk, like, the state was just telling us, there's something like a 25% vacancy rate in positions for the state, and people accept positions and they can't find housing. I mean, there's just no way out of this until we build our housing stock. But of course, that's another draw. That's a resource investment. But gosh, we're on the really cusp of something pretty great, I think, here in St. Johnsbury, and I hope your daughter I hope we make it work for her, because we'll keep working on it. Yeah.
She found pretty good skills for the academy and is able to apply it at the place in southern New Hampshire.
I'm glad to hear that. That's what we want. That's a success story. Even though I was gone for many years. I didn't come back until I was ready to have my third child. So, we come back eventually.
One was enough.
No, I believe me. Sorry, really.
Are there any other questions?
Oh, I just have a comment, not a question.
Okay.
Well, we've been involved in the system for a long time, and I'm impressed. I mean, when people say, you gotta just stop spending, it's like you have to give an education, and if you look at the academy's budget, almost half of it is not taxpayer money. It's money from somewhere else to get a really good program. This system has to come from all of us, and we're not getting half of it from somewhere else. So we're being asked to do something different actually than the academy does and get the same result.
Agreed.
And that's inherently not fair to compare those, but everybody does. Like everybody says, oh, the academy, I won't get off on my I mean, the academy's a great place. I'm just saying, there's a lot of money there. You need money to do an extraordinary program. So I respect what's going on here because, you know, there's so many problems. There's so many expectations of what the public school system has to do now with these kids. And a lot of parents simply will not put up with not having it. You know, like, oh no, sorry, it's too expensive to have special ed, go somewhere else. Well, they're not going to put up with that. That's our hands are tied. So you know, it's very difficult for us to say, stop spending, unless we just say people go away and take your kids with you who have problems or whatever. I'm on my soapbox now.
Well,
I just want to recognize how hard it is.
I said spend wisely. So that slide that you had up there for St. Johnsbury, last one, debt and taxes. You have to pay taxes on your facility?
You can pay taxes on a certain building, yes.
That's something that the St. Johnsbury School District does not have to do?
Correct, we do not.
So there's a little back from the academy.
Well, and none of our physical plant is paid for by the taxpayers. All of our buildings, everything we do, that is all
That's all
private.
self-funded, nothing comes from the, I understand, but you do pay taxes.
On some of them.
They're a nonprofit
Yep.
institution. I mean, just like
Can I
us.
ask one other question?
Yep.
Maybe you can certainly correct me if my observation is wrong, but are we seeing more and more expenditures directed toward student health, be it mental health or even physical health? You mentioned wanting to bring in dentists, et cetera. Are we seeing more and more kind of health expenses being incorporated into our educational process?
It is happening statewide, and they're talking about moving those services out of the ed fund because it shouldn't be part of the education fund. We have not done that here. There are services that we do provide, but we're using Medicaid reimbursement right now for like mental health, our clinicians that we have supporting students. So we've tried to find other ways because we do know it is in the educational quality standards that we meet the needs of students and the mental health needs of our students. But it seems that in our region, it seems to be a Northeast Kingdom regional problem, that we don't have the funding to support the needs of our communities. And I'm talking about Essex, Caledonia, Orleans. Northeast Kingdom Human Services supports this whole region, Northeast region, and their quotas are very limited. So it's really a struggle to say there's these large wait lists because they can't support the needs of our students, and that's from this whole Northeast region.
And as a follow-up, are the services that we're providing being directed toward us as a town by the state, or are the services that we are initiating on our own as a community to support our students?
It's an identified need of our students. It's not being pushed from the state. It's just based on student needs, and we could put them on wait lists.
Well, who's identifying this, that needs to happen, I guess?
So oftentimes these are kids that they're not attuned to education. So they're sometimes they literally are, and I've seen it, they are outside on the roundabout, and I will see 2 or 3 professionals working with a diligent, dedicated parent. Because there's always a parent there. And if they could have gotten their kid in the building, believe me, they don't look proud. They would like to have done it themselves. But oftentimes we are dealing with students either from an avoidance or a very escalated behavior telling us they're not ready to be in the building. And so until we're able to find them something, they literally have a hard time being in our building and doing it in a way that's safe for them, either emotionally or physically for them and around them.
I'm not questioning
No.
those sorts of issues. What I'm actually trying to have a better understanding of is what is the driver for why we're offering and expanding our services. You kindly explained that it's expanding statewide. But if it's a statewide issue, then it seems like somehow the state ought to be stepping up to the plate a little bit more. Raises a whole nother bag of issues. But
We agree.
So it's just something I'm trying to kind of wrap my head around, because when I look at the budget increases, particularly last year, there were some multiple 100% increases in our student health
Well,
issues.
can I just answer one specific discrete response to that? Because one of the things of previous, and I'm going to speak, one of the things of previous superintendents decided to do was they put our nurses into the ESSER budget. And we are required by law for the education to have a certain amount of nurses per students. We had to put those back into our local budget because a decision had been made that should have had more oversight. I will own that. So that money, so I think the line item that you're referring to is a little bit of it wasn't an increase in staffing, it was an increase of where we were drawing that money from. And had we made different decisions, you would have seen that differently, because that's just not a line item we can actually change.
There were several.
Several
line items last year.
And we do have 2 clinicians in the building, mental health clinicians, that is in no way, shape, it is not the role of schools. It's not anything we put our hand up and said we want to do, but those are grant funded. So you're actually not seeing those positions in this budget, but they're very much, and there's a wait list, right? We're still not meeting demand. And we would love to get out of the mental health business.
Thank you.
Thank you. Actually, sorry, thank you. I really appreciate the questions from everybody, and the support from the people who, this is leading out there enough for us also. Sorry.
Are there any other questions? At any time, you can reach out to the district office, reach out to me directly. I respond to email pretty quickly, don't I, Mike?
You sure do?
Yep. So if you have any questions at all or anything we can clarify on the detailed line items, I'd be more than happy to answer any more questions.
This will be on the website?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep, we will post. We've been posting, we've tried to upgrade our website to make it accessible. We're also putting some FAQs out there, so as questions are asked, we'll make sure we're capturing it so we can clarify for everyone. So we really appreciate you coming this evening and taking the time. And we look forward to additional, our school board meets. We have a school board meeting next Monday. 6 p.m. They're all online as well, so you can join us remotely or come in person. We look forward to the feedback and continued conversation. So thank you very much.
We'll do it.